All right, do you want to? All right. Thanks, Bernice. So I am going to give you a welcome today from the Indigenous Resilience Center at the University of Arizona. My name is Kathy Isaacson, and I come here from the American Indian Higher Education Consortium, AHEC. Hi. And today I'm just going to start out by telling you a little bit about the center and about the Native Fuse Alliance, and then introducing our guest. So, and I don't know, Bernice, maybe you want to say something more, but what's so exciting about the Indigenous Resilience Center is that they have an aim to position the University of Arizona and their center as a world leader in resilience, research, education, and outreach. And we love ambitious goals. That's definitely one. Many of you today are probably associated with them. And they are offering this student showcase Thursdays at 1 p.m. Mountain Time, I think, or maybe Pacific Time. Got all screwed up. Last week, we featured two stellar students and their research, and we have another one today. We are representing in a larger context our alliance called the Native Fuse Alliance, and I am the director of the backbone for our alliance, and we also have an ambitious goal to significantly, like by 20%, broaden the participation of Native American students in food, energy, and water systems, so FUSE, both in careers and education, in order to address the critical challenges in their communities. So within those two contexts, today we have our student showcase, and I'm really excited. I've met and worked with Nizhoni, and we're so grateful for her research. So let me just give you a brief introduction of her, and then I'm sure she has her own way of introducing herself. But Nizhoni is a graduate student at the University of Arizona in the School of Natural Resources and Environment. And she focuses on natural resources and land management, and was a past IndigiFuse trainee, and also is very involved in ACES and served as their historian. She's really passionate about the outdoors and cares so much about learning how to be a good steward of our land. And so we're grateful for that. So let me introduce Nizhoni. You can take it away. We will put ourselves on mute. And when your presentation is done, we'll have some time for questions. Okay? Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kathy. Really great to be here. I'll just share my screen with my presentation. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold right now, but I'll do the best I can. Okay, awesome. Let me see. So like Kathy was saying, I'm a current graduate student at the University of Arizona, and I am currently studying natural resources. And this is my second year, and I'll be graduating with my master's and then going directly into my PhD this fall. So super exciting. So this is my research I'm working on currently. And the title of this research is called It's a Sign, Understanding Variations and Telling Indigenous Histories Within Public Outdoor Spaces. Oh, okay, cool. And some of just to go over an overview of what I'm going to be talking about today is a little bit about me, my introduction, objective, methods, 6 R's framework, observations, further questions, conclusion, and next steps. So I'm just as I was born in Rough Rock, Arizona. I am the daughter of Steve and Loretta Tallas, and also the sister of 6 older brothers, and a friend to a lot of people here in Arizona and also across the states. And I'm a student, a mentor, and so forth. So it's really cool mentioning those things, and I really appreciate when other presenters mentioned those things because I'm like, oh, that's actually really true. So I'm trying to get used to talking and presenting myself in that way. And some of the things I enjoy is hiking, skiing, and camping. And I also like boba. Boba is really good, just to throw that out there. And then these two photos is one being on campus there when I first started at the University of Arizona, so 2 years ago. And then another photo of my family is there with my grandma. So really grateful for their support, for being able to support me in this endeavor of like graduate school. And then finally going into, okay, and then I'll be introducing some of the background on what kind of encouraged my research or what got me to think about the importance of Indigenous histories and stories within the spaces. Is the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966 and the National Environmental Policy Act of 1970. So both these policies play a key role in preserving and protecting cultural sites, heritage sites, and for the Environmental Policy Act of 1970, it actually they do an environmental impact assessment to make sure that whatever development is happening in that particular location, in this instance, and outdoors, that they are actually getting the right, that they're assessing what kind of impact is going to happen with if this development project goes through. So my thinking was, although these two policies exist, there's still that gap between federal and tribal partnerships that still exists today, especially when it comes to including Native knowledge and Native history within outdoor spaces, and in this case, within signage. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but thought I'd share that. And so the objective of my current project right now is to understand language patterns utilized in public land signage and educational displays by addressing patterns found throughout the National Park Service, Bureau of Land Management, and U.S. Forest Service, and also USDA too. Currently, NPS is making some progress in changing place names. Oh, excuse me, and providing more appropriate and culturally relevant language. And as you can see on the photo right there, that's Canyon de Chelly. That's one of the tribal parks located on the Navajo Nation. So I took that over the summer right after a rainstorm. So it looked really beautiful. And just wanted to mention that. And then the framework that I wanted to, let me see. And the framework that I'm using to better understand this is using the 6 R's. So the first R being representation, so it being inclusive of tribal members, the inclusive of Native language usage within signage, and then relevance, production of tool, a framework like this one, or even modifying this framework to fit each particular tribal community that will most benefit their histories and storytelling. And then responsibility, protection of cultural sites, plants, and animals, and then making sure that the park is actually being able to share accurate stories and histories. And then reciprocity, the exchange of knowledge and resources, because that actually maintains those relationships and builds trust between federal agencies and tribal communities. And the next one is respect. Another thing is being mindful of time that the community is giving to the project, and also like the amount of time is given to provide feedback on different projects and developments and so forth. And then also opportunities for communities to come together and participate. And then relationship, this kind of like encapsulates all the R's, because if you are practicing all these R's, then that relationship will begin to get better with time, and also like will encourage participation in tribal events even, and will produce cohesive discussions on these topics that are really important for tribal members and tribal communities to feel included within outdoor spaces, and that their stories are actually being heard and seen from visitors and also from just the general public, whoever do come to like the outdoor spaces, but also especially for their community members to feel like they are welcomed in those spaces. And then some of the methods that I use to get some of this information and to better understand what this looks like is using the photo to text. So I took pictures of all these different signs throughout different parts in the Southwest. Roughly about 14 sites I was able to capture, some being in New Mexico, most being in Arizona. So for this example, here is a sign at Monument Valley, and that was the only tribal park I was able to get. And then just to show an example of like what that looks like from like the picture to there. And then going on to the next one is the metadata. So this is where we are able to get that information from that text, from that photo to text, and actually put it into different columns. And I was looking at getting, for sure, organizing the images from each location and then leaking that image. And unfortunately, we weren't really able to figure out the GPS coordinates of those photos just because I had a couple of undergraduate students working with me, and then we had different phones. So hopefully we could figure that out a little bit better. And then of course, the type of site that we took, and for sure looking at what, if they did have native language usage in that particular sign, the year that sign was written, because that's really important to note how current is the information, or how like how long ago did they make that sign. And then that type of signage, for sure, is understanding like, is this an outdoor sign and things like that. And yeah, so just that I want to just put these two photos up. There is a little bit more columns, but I wanted you all to see it and to read a little bit about what that looks like and read the little examples I have below. And then the one I'm doing, the step I'm doing currently right now is my data analysis. Is highly qualitative, for sure, based on the signage and going over the metadata, and now I'm coding. So here's a screenshot of my Excel sheet. It's in its initial phases. So I'm looking at the themes from each R. So looking at respect, in this case, like, does that sign honor the knowledge in that particular sign? Is there a context balance between non-tribal and tribal histories? Does it include tribal names or even tribal languages? And so I'm going through each of those signs and really seeing how well does this show respect to the tribal community based on what language and the information it provides. So this is currently where I'm at now. I'm still working on a lot of it, but hopefully I could get a lot of great information from this and really answer the objective I had at the start. And then my observations here, I wanted to show just different examples of the signs that I've saw. So one being in Tuzagut, that was really nice seeing, did you know? In not many parks, I don't see the sign as often. So it was really nice seeing their acknowledgement of the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. And then Monument Valley being a tribal park, and seeing how they were able to present their information in a unique way for a tribal park. And then finally being Walnut Canyon, here's a cool snippet of a plant info sign that gives you a little information about what that plant is. But also at the very bottom, you can see that they actually name that plant in two different native languages, which is like really awesome, and to see that. And then going on for the offensive observations. So some of the motivations of doing this research is actually seeing language that is not great. It's like for Kabab Visitor Center, I was reading over this particular sign, and it uses the word discovered, which isn't very welcoming. And today it could be seen as being negative, having like a negative attachment to that word. And for a lot of communities, especially tribal, we don't really see that as being correct because tribal and because our ancestors and our people have been here long before settlers. And then same goes for the Navajo Bridge Visitor Center for that example, when they use the word colonization. Same thing, you know, there just needs to be a change in language in these signs. And these are just prime examples of that. And then another one being first European visitor in Canyon of the Ancients. So on this sign, when we were walking through, they named this site after the first European visitor, but it's also like, why did they do that? Because I'm sure the Pueblo have a name of their own they want to use, or they want to make a name that is appropriate for that site. So really thinking about how these words have an impact on the histories and also the stories that are being told at these places, especially for people who are visiting them that are not from the US. And then even people that are just now learning about Indigenous people. And then there's also respectful observations that I saw as well. So acknowledging the wrongs. So this was also at Tuzagood. They actually saw that, you know, the observation practices were wrong and harmful, and therefore they are not doing that anymore. So I think that's really beneficial to see the park system able to acknowledge those wrongs in the past, and then to move forward in a better in looking at different artifacts and looking at their ancestral sites and culture sites and how they talk about those sites. And then another cool picture I took was indoor Tuzagoot, and that gives a just little snippet of someone of someone who's part of Pueblo of Zuni, whose ancestors lived in that place. And he just gave his connection to that area. And that was really nice to see because that's giving voice to the community and saying how significant that place has in those people's histories and even currently now. So that's really, it was really cool to see. And then just going again with the tribal parks, here's a couple photos from Monmouth Valley just to give a little closer look. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to get many tribal parks just due to the COVID restrictions. And I just wanted to be really respectful about going there and visiting different parks. So unfortunately, only Monmouth Valley I was able to get. But just through those signs, I was able to see what a difference in language being used when it comes from the community and with the community. So in these cases, I saw that they used a lot of language that was appropriate to that area, appropriate to the Navajo culture and how they are connected to that place and land. But also they were able to talk about the history of Monmouth Valley as a park itself. So it was like a good balance between both of those. So that was really nice to see. And then for further questions, looking at how does language and public displays impact tribal communities? How does language and public displays affect public impressions of Indigenous nations? Does these signs reflect collaborations between tribal communities and federal agencies within the Southwest region? Are there differences between the language used based on a specific federal agency? So these are a few questions that I'm currently thinking about, and hopefully through the research I'm doing now, I'll be able to answer those with my data analysis and also looking into interviewing community members. And then for conclusion, the signs do demonstrate inconsistencies in how Indigenous communities are represented. This included language and past tense, lack of cultural stories, and outdated presentation styles. And most of the signs that I've looked at and read from these different sites, some were really old, some haven't been updated for decades. But also there are a couple of places that have updated those signs. So that was really encouraging. But when I was talking to some of the park managers in those particular sites, those being Chuzigoot and Walnut, they mentioned that the reason why they had that opportunity to update those signs is because COVID happened and a lot of the sites closed. So that gave them an opportunity to update signs. So I'm just kind of thinking like, maybe with more support, some of these smaller agencies will be able to change and update those signs and actually work with tribal communities in their regions. And just because, at the end of the day, this does support the importance of tribal consultation, and it does make a difference in how outdoor signage is written and is shown, especially when it comes to sharing Indigenous stories. And some of the next steps here is creating a multi-level index formulation. I'm still looking at what that will look like and understanding how well does these federal agencies that manage these outdoor spaces work with tribal nations, and seeing, is there an area that needs to be worked on? Then based on what I was able to get from the signs and from other management documents, I'll be able to, they will be able to make that determination on how well they are working with tribal nations. So that's kind of the thought process with that. And of course, like continuing doing community outreach in areas, building that relationship for sure, and seeing what else the tribal nation wants to see in that. And then for sure, sample more sites from different federal agencies to get more of a robust sample site or sample size. And then to look at more tribal parks as well and see what difference in the language that is there and what can these federal agencies learn from tribal parks as well. And then after interviews with community members, managers, and professors, I think that will be an amazing opportunity to learn from them, but also to learn from what I'm able to offer as well. And yeah, thank you so much for listening.
Yay, Nizhoni. Thank you so much. What important research. Maybe you should leave your, well, let's open questions. You might want to bring your presentation back up in case we want to point out something, but thank you. So let's take some questions and discussion. You can either raise your hand or put something in the chat or just speak up. I know I have a couple of questions. Well, let me get us started. Oh, okay. Go ahead, Kara. I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I was double muted. Nizhoni, congratulations. This is ambitious. And it's really staggering the amount of data you have and how it's, this qualitative, just amazing quantity of qualitative data. And you might have said this at the beginning, but I'm just wondering, what put you on this trail for your research? And I was having sound difficulties in the beginning, so I apologize if you covered this.
No worries. It was really like going off of my own lived experiences and really understanding and seeing like, oh wow, these signs at these national parks I got to visit when I was younger, or even now. I just saw this need of like more Indigenous voices to be included in these signs and accurate histories to be presented. And I noticed there was a lot of language that is offensive on these signs, and that could be really discouraging for other tribal nations and other people who are wanting to go to these other outdoor spaces. So just seeing that your own like community is not represented well in these signs is just like, I felt like not welcomed in that space. So I was like, I really want to understand like, how deep does this go? Like how many parks do need to update their signs? And it just really encouraged me to see like what other policies are put in place to make sure that these signs are being updated and that these histories are being shared appropriately and with the community in the whole process of doing that. And or even if these federal agencies thought of like making sure that the tribal communities are involved with this process. So I haven't really, when I would ask like some park managers about it, they're like, yeah, you know, we don't know, like maybe one person will write these histories. So it's kind of like each park is different, and acknowledging that, I'm like, oh wow, this is gonna be difficult. But it really encouraged me to really just start like looking at the signs and then seeing like where we're at currently. But yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Again, great job. Thank you.
Thanks.
Alice, I see you have a question.
Yes, fascinating talk, Nizhoni. By the way, it's so good to see your face. We communicated quite a bit by email, so thank you. You know, I love this work, and what I'm excited about is the next step, because right now you're understanding the variations, you're doing the basic research, but I wonder what thoughts you have on how to make it actionable. And you know, some thoughts that come to mind is seeing a before and after, you know, presenting your research and then look at the changes or make recommendations to some of the parks. But what are your thoughts on the action aspects of it?
So that's a great question. And I would love to make this available for other federal agencies to learn from. That's like one of the key things, but also to see what other tribal communities are able to offer, to also share with how well, like what can the federal agencies do to make sure that tribal community members are getting the opportunity to be involved with the creation of these signs, and what kind of ways they're able to get compensated for those opportunities as well, and not just used as volunteers, and not to just extract that language, but finding a way to like build that relationship over time, which is why I just love the 6 hours framework, and how inclusive it is, and how it's really like you can actually use that, like for sure, like the federal agencies. And then for those actions, I do hope with this research, I'll be able to encourage more of these park managers or managers of these other outdoor spaces to really consider how they are presenting the histories of that area. And also how are they sharing the histories of Indigenous peoples, especially with their stories and language. Are they making sure that it's appropriate? Are they making sure that that community is being welcomed in that space with that type of signage being presented? And that's kind of what I'm leaning more towards. And then again, you know, looking at how can this be shared more widely with communities, is potentially making a documentary of some sort that falls into a line of sharing this information and sharing that tribal communities do have really a close connection to land and place, and just to like share those perspectives, and to encourage more or encourage these federal agencies to see how important this topic is. It may not seem like huge, it may seem like very like I don't know, it may not be at their priority list. That's what I'm trying to say, I guess, but it's trying to like have them see like it should be one of the topics at their priority list. And maybe they don't even see that because no one has really said anything about it or have done concrete research on it. So it's like myself as a researcher, I would love to do that and present the information. But not only for the federal agencies, but for everyone that is interested in learning about histories and how does it, the role it plays within these national parks and other outdoor spaces, which is another motivation for doing that documentary, to involve the communities of these outdoor spaces and to give that opportunity to share it more widely so more people can get encouraged to push their own national parks to make sure they're being included, making sure that their signs are being updated, and not wait decades until they're updated again. So it's just kind of making that momentum and building that, and making room for that conversation to be had within different spaces. I know I'm just a graduate student, but it'd be great to like actually have managers talk about this.
Thank you. That's exciting. And you're not just a graduate student. You are a terrific graduate student.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, Chelsea, I see you have a question.
Hi, Nizhoni. Thank you so much for sharing. It's really great to hear your research. And I wanted to compliment you on how you described your methods, how you made it so accessible, and what you said did not sound like research speak, which I really appreciate. And I think that's a very difficult thing to do, especially about such a nuanced and topic that touches on so many aspects of language, culture, history. So great job. My question was somewhat similar to Alice's, in terms of your future thoughts on how to use this work and how to perhaps connect various park folks to one another so they can learn from each other. So you sort of already answered that. I can do a different thing. So I can offer a suggestion if you're open to documentary opportunities. Yeah. Before I came to grad school, I did work, a lot of environmental work with tribes in Southern California. And I got to know folks at Patagonia. And Patagonia has their own agendas, but they do support documentary work of this type. And if you're interested, I'm happy to connect you with folks who you could pitch this idea of a documentary to. And if they agree and you agree to work with them, they fund it.
That's cool.
So that's one opportunity for a documentary that could lead to what you're talking about. So I'm happy to do that. And then the other comment question is, this work is also, I see, is really reflected in museums. I just came back from DC, and the American Indian Museum was really difficult for me to walk through and read the descriptions as compared to other museums. I felt like there was a big gap, and I don't know that all of the people that were there were realizing that. And part of that was who was being referred to. The exhibits were in reference to the viewer instead of the items or the stories that they were sharing. So I'm wondering if you saw that in any of your work, or if there's any sort of referential work or other nuance that you're encountering with the national parks signs.
Yeah. Thank you so much for all that, Chelsea. And yeah, we could totally get in touch about Patagonia. Thank you so much for that and sharing that with me. And to answer your so sorry, oh my god, my throat. And to answer your question, yeah, I think being able to just review all these different signs from all these different parks, it really like gives me a perspective like, wow, like a lot of this history that is being told is so like settler focused. Like a lot of the spaces are talking about, wow, you know, these people came first here, and then this is what happened when this park got developed. But like it doesn't really share a history of like the tribal communities in the area at that time either. It doesn't say, oh yeah, like they fought with the tribe to get this land, or even they took this land from the tribal community in this region. They don't share any of that. And I think that's a key part that's missing in a lot of these signs, and also like you're mentioning in museums, you know. But that could also be like a very like political thing too, because they don't want people to know. So it's kind of really see how can we move forward, especially when we talk with park managers of these outdoor spaces, like how are they advocating on their end to make sure that they are sharing a well-balanced history of like tribal communities and non-tribal communities. and how can they do that in a respectful manner, but also like a lot of the history should be told, because in our US schools, a lot of it is not being shared. So this gives another opportunity to educate the general population about the histories of these regions, especially within the Southwest. There's so much history, but also to give a space for community members that have stories to share about these locations. I don't think it will ever take away from whatever they have to talk about settler colonists coming into these regions. I think it'll actually add more to the different like outdoor spaces, and that'll actually make it more personal, and will make it feel like these visitors are actually coming and learning about this place from not only a white perspective, but also from an indigenous tribal perspective of that area, which is like really important. And it's just really understanding like how can we get to that area, or how can we get to that point. And I think like this research I'm doing now and the opportunities that hopefully I will have in the future to present this, and the work and the data that I'll get from it, and I'll be able to share that with the tribe, and then also whatever they would like to share, work with them to present it to their parks nearby their region or within their communities too, and just see like what they would like to see done different. And yeah, so it's like, yeah, so it's been really interesting looking at the different signs. And I think it's really just been 14 sites too. So it's not even a lot of sites. So it's really interesting to see like what kind of diversity there will be if I get even more sites in the Southwest, because there's a bunch of sites. And it's just like the time and travel to get to all those different areas. But it'll be really awesome to also make a story map of this location too, of all the different locations I've gone, to also share that more widely and make it more accessible too, and more like, interactive. And we'll see like, this is what a current sign says in this area, but then, they made that change to make it more inclusive and the language more better. So now this is the difference. So like I know someone mentioned that, seeing that difference between non like tribal involvement and then having tribal involvement in the creation of a particular sign. I think that will be very strong in showing how vital that is and how much of a difference that will make. So that's all in the future. But that's all, I'm already thinking about things. But yeah, thank you so much for mentioning those, or for just making those comments. And those are just some things that I've been thinking about as well. And I feel like this is just the start of like really seeing who else is working on this work. How can I collaborate? And also because it's just, I don't want to just travel around to all these parks. I want to make it more fun, more inclusive for the community. Maybe even have an event when I'm going to these different parks, because that's so engaging. And yeah, so I don't want to just be taking pictures and whatever. But for now. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Jenna, hi. What's your question?
Hi. I'm just so thankful to be here. When I saw I've been wanting to go to all the presentations, but with my schedule, usually I have another meeting at this time, but it's been rescheduled. So I'm so happy to be here. And that was such a beautiful, like just well done presentation, and also how you tell the story of the project, like how you talk about it. I think it's very well done and accessible kind of for different like contexts and people. Like it can very much be, I think, adapted depending on who your audience is. So like you spoke about when you met with the like the land, I forgot what they're called, but the land people, the state land people, I don't know what you call them, and but then that's just like one, part of the people in the community you may be interacting with. There's all these other, parts, and like the Indigenous, the Native community local to the area and also in other places, and making connections. It sounds like of like creating this framework where Indigenous communities can be in control of what they want to share, and they also have the space, right, to share their resources and their histories, because that's worth, also celebrating like their rich cultures, and that, they're still existing today and thriving. So I love that piece about also just it just feels like a very like a gentle, like welcoming approach, like an invitation to working with like, the land office and different like agencies, I guess, who historically have like, caused, I think, so much like, have caused so much harm. So I see your approach very restorative. And I also want to just piggy off of sorry, Chelsea, and say I too have some ideas for who I can connect you to for documentary filmmaking in the Southwest. I know someone also who worked on Bristol Bay documentaries. I'll send the link. Bristol Bay in Alaska. So when Kathy at the beginning mentioned that school in Alaska, it also I made that connection. And I do have one question about and I'm sorry if you covered it and I missed it. What's like the specific, like what is, I guess, the Pacific, or I mean, the Southwest, like I'm not originally from the Pacific Southwest, and I'm not always sure, like, or the Southwest or the Intermountain West, and so I'm not quite sure, like, what is included in that region. So I'm interested, and I mean, it's probably unique to who's speaking, right? So what is your perspective on what is the what is the reach and like the area of the locations of people who you would like to talk to and do this research with during your program?
Thank you so much, Gina, for sharing all of that. You're so kind for sharing those sweet comments. And so for the Southwest, I'm just including the Four Corners region. So like New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, and what did I say? Yeah, I think so. And Utah. Yeah, I think so. I'm like thinking about it.
I mean, Utah also has, like a Navajo, right? They have Navajo. You spoke working with, sorry, I'll let you talk. Sorry.
No, so like mostly like Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and then being able to get more sites from those, and then from there, like making those connections with people in those different states. So then I could like hopefully do a project in the future of some sorts, but that's currently what I'm looking at now. But for now, I'm just trying to understand this part of it, and then I'm hopefully going to be expanding a lot for my dissertation work in the fall. But yeah, thank you.
Great. I'm going to make a comment and a question, then I don't see anyone else with their hand up. Nizhoni, I was struck early on when one of your early comments was just mentioning the gap between federal and tribal politics and how your research might address that gap. And so, when you said that early on, I was listening for, oh, well, how can this research address that gap? And I totally see how it can. And I'm so grateful. One of the things Jenna mentioned is, I think Jenna, you said gentle approach, and the word that I would say, I would describe your research as invitational. And that's something I've focused on in my whole career, is how do we do research that's invitational so people can listen to it, consider it. And I'll tell you, if I were at one of these federal agencies, I would be watching your progress and be waiting patiently for the results, because I think you present it in a way that they'll be, interested and excited to hear. And so just one quick question. I know we just have a few minutes left, but I was really struck by the way you're using the 6 R's in your coding, in your qualitative methodology. And I, seen and read about the 6 R's, but to have such a practical use for it. And it might even go further, because I was thinking, how you said there was the offensive signs and the welcome and the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I was thinking, when your research is finished, the agencies will be able to look at their signage and see how they did in comparison to the 6 R's. And I think that could eventually be a very powerful tool for them that you're offering. And so my quick question to you is, who do you give credit for the 6 R's?
I was looking at different, there's been a lot of kind of case studies on the 6 R's. And also there's been 3 R's and 4 R's. So there's a lot of different R's that researchers have been using. But what gave me the idea to use all 6 is just by looking at the park signages itself, looking at outdoor recreation and seeing the need of all those R's and how all those R's make sense to include. But for sure, when I was looking at papers, it just talks about how can it be inclusive for Indigenous scholars, especially within like higher education and also understanding of faculty. So there's a paper that talks about them using the 6 R's, and that paper really encouraged me to look at the 6 R's more closely and how does that apply to outdoor signage and understand that better. And that talked about faculty in STEM positions and how well are they being welcomed in those spaces, and what is the university doing to making sure that they are felt seen. And I could even drop that article in the chat if that's okay.
Yeah.
But I think like that really motivated me to use the 6 R's, because there's been quite a few different papers that have used the 3 R's and 4 R's, but they all modified it to make it their own in a sense that made the most benefit for the project and made the most sense. So I'm kind of doing that a little bit. That makes the most sense here. But yeah, so I could look at that real quick.
Yeah, and thanks, Alice. And just one second. What I think that paper, one of the original papers, one of the authors was Ruth Plenty Sweetgrass She Kills, I think, and she's one of our colleagues with the Native Fuse Alliance. And so as an aside, Alice, I think we should do something from the Native Fuse Alliance, some type of workshop or something about the 6 R's, and especially seeing how useful it is to Nizhoni's research and then to the one with STEM faculty. That would be awesome. Maybe you can lead it, Nizhoni. Okay, Alice, question, comment. I think you're on mute.
I keep clicking. Okay. Yeah, well, actually, Ruth we're trying to schedule her to speak at one of our seminars that'll be alliance wide, but it would be great if Nizhoni could play a role in that.
Yeah.
If you'd be willing to do that or moderate that. I was wondering, because I'm new to it, I read this article from the tribal colleges, and how did you find out about the 6 R's? I'm curious, Nizhoni.
So I found out by this. I found out about the 6 Rs from I think last fall during my first year of grad school. I was taking a class on traditional ecological knowledge, and through that class, we had to write a paper about how can that um, how does traditional knowledge can be incorporated within our own fields of study. So then, since my field of study is looking at outdoor recreation management, land management, I was really trying to understand like what are some ways that we can bring in traditional ecological knowledge. And one of those ways, when I was doing my article research, I came across 6 Rs. But first, I came across 4 Rs. And then through that references, I was like, oh, this is 6R. So then I went through that and I was like, this is really cool. I don't know why I haven't seen this before. So that was kind of my first introduction to that. And then I didn't think too much of it. I was thinking like this would be really great to include in my research, but little did I know that it would be a big part of my research currently. Because after looking at my research and looking at what I would like to do in the future, I was like, no, this is actually a great framework to implement or even try to understand how signs are sharing that history. Or at that point, I was just thinking of how well are these outdoor spaces sharing indigenous histories and knowledge systems? Are they even incorporating traditional ecological knowledge in these spaces? So at that point, I was like, okay, how can I hone that question or that broad idea down? And then to look at some concrete examples. So then I focused more on signage. And then there's also another faculty who were also very interested in signs as well, because they're in anthropology in the anthro department at my university, and they were also really interested in that work. So then we collaborated together into really bringing that project up and getting it going, and that started this past fall. So then I was like, okay, this makes the most sense, and using the 6 Rs I think will be most beneficial. At first, I wasn't too sure if all of the 6 Rs will apply, but after doing a couple of field sites and looking at the photos there and reading some of the signs at those different locations, I was like, yeah, for sure, these federal agencies or park managers for sure need to understand like how useful these Rs will be and how important they are when sharing these stories. And also just when they work and consult and uh, consultate with different tribal communities in that area. So that's kind of how I learned about the 6 Rs. And after that, I was like, oh, wow, this is awesome. And then a lot of other people were like, wow, 6 Rs. So, and then I started seeing a lot more about it. And I think it's up and going right now, because I know there's a session for Native youth that is going to be talking about the 6 Rs. And I was like, that's so exciting. So I'm like super stoked to see all this great research coming out about it.
I can just see a comic strip in my mind, like these federal agency guys are standing around in their suits and they're talking to each other about their signage and saying, how many of the 6 Rs did your signs meet up with? Kind of a little competition. So, okay, well, we're just about at the end of our time. Any final comments or questions for Nizhoni? Well, we are just, oh, go ahead, Gina.
Oh, I was just gonna ask, what's your preferred way of us like reaching out or like sending you the resources we thought of today?
Oh yeah, of course. So sorry, I didn't even mention that. You could just send it to my email, and then here's my email. I put in the chat. And also, if you have any other questions or just want to chat about more of this stuff or anything similar or anything like that, feel free to email me. I'm more than willing to have that time to talk about it. And I'm just so grateful that you all were able to join. I haven't really presented this updated version of my research, so it's been really exciting to be able to do that for you all. And thank you so much for the awesome comments and for also the feedback. That's really appreciated. and really awesome that we're all women here. So that's pretty cool. So I just saw that. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. But yes, I will see most of you, or if you all go into the Native Views conference, I'll see you in person or online, whatever works. But yeah, thank you so much for joining.
I look
And
forward
join
to
us-
seeing you. Yeah.
And join us next week, Thursday, same time, Native Views Alliance Student Showcase, and tell your friends. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.